Hi, I'm Tara, and welcome to Let's Do Books. This week I'm excited because I'm joined today by Paige Braddock, who is a cartoonist who's best known for her 20-year running comic strip, Jane's World, which was also the first LGBTQ strip to receive national online syndication. Some of you may also know her as the novelist Missouri Vaun, which is how I first came into contact with her work. She has 13 LesFic books out with Bold Strokes Books, the latest of which is Chasing Sunset, and it's available everywhere. Welcome, Paige.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, you have had a really interesting career. But before diving into your career, I wanted to actually ask first, how did you discover lesbian fiction, and what did it mean to you when you did discover it?
Well, I think I was kind of late to the party because I didn't start reading lesbian fiction until probably 2013, which is not that long ago. It started because as you said, I did comics for a lot of years, and I had all these graphic novel ideas that I never got a chance to pursue because graphic novels take forever, and I was already doing Jane's World. So I had this thought in my head. I was like, I wonder if because this was when self-publishing on Amazon was starting to sort of pick up, right? And I was like, I wonder if I could just write this as a prose novel and not draw it. But I'd never done it. So I got online, I started exploring, and I came across some LesFic books, one from like Kim Baldwin, which was kind of an adventure story, which is what I was doing. And then I read another Kim Baldwin story, and I was like, wait a minute, these are kind of cool. I didn't really know that those stories existed, right? And then I discovered Radclyffe's Provincetown series, which has kind of a hero component to it. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try this. So I really got into it because I was trying to find a place for stories that I wanted to tell, but didn't know if they had a place, right? Mm-hmm. And then I just sort of discovered this whole world that's awesome and amazing.
Well, that's pretty cool. So like when you were growing up, you didn't like stumble across any of the...
No, I led a very sheltered youth. I was raised Southern Baptist, so, evangelical. I basically had access to my church library. And from the church library, as a kid, I discovered the Chronicles of Narnia. That was my first big book discovery that I fell in love with. But that really sent me in the direction of science fiction. I didn't read, all through high school, I didn't really read any other kind of fiction. I read like Dune, that kind of stuff. Doc Savage, if you know Doc Savage, that's an oldie but goodie.
No.
I had a cousin, and he gave me like a whole box of like Doc Savage paperbacks. He was like this superhero kind of dude, but not really a superhero. He was more like an Indiana Jones kind of character. Anyway, but as you can see, you're not seeing lesbian characters in any of these stories, right?
No.
Yeah. So eventually I was like, all right, this is boring, I'm gonna go. So I started reading, I mostly read nonfiction then from then on. Like once I sort of outgrew, I read Anne McCaffrey's Dragon Rider series. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, I just sort of got bored with the fictions offerings. And so I started reading a lot of nonfiction. Yeah, so I didn't come back. It's like, and all of a sudden, while I wasn't paying attention, there was lesbian fiction. Like, I think I read in college, I read Ruby Fruit Jungle, and I read Fried Green Tomatoes. But beyond that, not much. It's sad, really, isn't it? But think about it. You're like a little kid in rural Mississippi. How are you going to find it? Like, nobody's telling you, hey, there's this cool lesbian book you could read.
I totally understand. I was not in Mississippi, obviously. I grew up in small town, Southern Ontario, kind of like just across the river from Detroit, which a lot of people don't realize is actually one of Canada's Bible belts. So I also grew up in a very similar Baptist church. That's right. And it wasn't until I was pregnant with my oldest daughter that I found out that lesbian romance was a thing at all. Obviously I knew that like women could love other women, but like as a genre, or as a like for books.
Right.
And that was it. Like that was revelatory. And I'm trying to think. It was only a couple of years before, it would have only been a few years before you found it. Yeah,
because you think, I remember when like Ellen's series was on TV, right? And you're like, and suddenly you realize that you've never seen yourself in popular culture reflected back at you, right? That show was so meaningful for so many people because you saw yourself in her sort of representation or whatever. And then you're like, oh, so this is what it's like to be straight, where everything you see in popular culture reflects back your experience. You're like, wow, that feels kind of amazing, because you always sort of feel this otherness, but you don't know that there's a place for you, right? Or a place for your stories. That's what lesbian fiction offers that.
It's so true.
I wish I'd discovered it sooner. I really think that self-publishing and like fan fiction and all that stuff, it paved the way for what we now have as a more mature LesFic publishing world, right?
Absolutely. So one of the other sites that I review at is Smart Bitches Trashy Books, and Sarah Wendell, who runs that, also has a podcast that goes with it. And she was asking what were the best books that I read last year. And so I talked about Anne Bannon's Bebo Brinker series. And I was saying how you can...
I've never read that.
Oh, man.
I haven't read that. I got to do it.
It's so good. And it's available in ebook. You can get the omnibus for like $20 on Amazon and get all 5 books.
Oh, wow.
I'm going to warn you, okay. The 5th book is a really, really, really rough ride. Like a real rough ride. Oh, yeah. There's like domestic violence and alcoholism. Corrective rape comes up. A dog gets murdered.
No. I don't know if I can handle it.
You don't even have to read that one. Even if you only read Odd Girl Out and then read the book called Bebo Brinker, it doesn't... Mm-hmm. There's no kind of connection between the two. There's no overlap in the characters.
Okay.
But they're both wonderful, and you will not need a cuddle when you finish.
Okay, that's good to know. Thanks for the heads up.
Yeah, no, that's... Whew, yeah. I think it's Women in Shadows is that one, and like that's yeah, you gotta be ready. You gotta like gird yourself for that one. But it's still like they're so good, and I was talking to her about how you can trace the fiction that we're at now from there, because you can see like she directly influenced Catherine V. Forrest and among others. I'm just going to pick one example of a through line. She influenced Catherine V. Forrest, who influenced, oh my God, how many people was Curious Wine the coming out book, even just in terms of LesFic authors?
Yeah.
Right? Like Georgia Beers talks about it. Karen Kallmaker talks about it, like a lot of people. And then from there, I believe that if you take that, and then if you take Xena fan fiction.
Yeah, there you go.
Like, you don't get to where we are today without fan fiction, and then this through line of courageous women who were writing when it was illegal to be gay.
Right.
And it's pretty incredible.
Right.
So, I'd like to talk about Jane's World now. How did that come about?
Well, it's funny, because mainstream comics bears a strong resemblance to mainstream publishing in that there are very few lesbian cartoonists. And I, for years since college, had been trying to submit comic strip ideas to syndicates for newspapers because I really wanted to do a comic strip. And I'd always get the same kind of stuff from editors that the work I was doing, the characters weren't gender specific enough. If you think about every newspaper in the country, almost every editor was male, and he was, probably in his 50s, and he had an idea about what women readers wanted, what women were like, and that's what he wanted in a comic. And that, I just couldn't write that, right? I mean, that wasn't my experience. I think at the time it was like Kathy and Len Johnston doing For Better or Worse, and I don't know who else would have been. Back in the day, there were women like the woman who did Brenda Starr actually wrote under a pen name because there were no women doing comics. I mean, it was just that kind of environment, right? So at some point I was like, well, screw it. I'm just going to do what I'm going to do, right? I was working at a newspaper as an illustrator. And so I would go home at night and I would eat like sugary cereal and sit in front of the TV and just write and just draw comics that made me laugh. And then I just started publishing them online. I had a nerdy friend who was an IT guy, and he helped me build a website. This was 1995. So this is like before anybody had webcomics, right? This is when there was no webcomic sort of category.
Yeah.
But in the same way that fan fiction opened up spaces for LesFic, I think these early webcomics opened up spaces for all this other storytelling now that's in books, right? Stuff you see in books now in comics you would have never seen in 1995.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I just started kind of doing it. Like I started, I think, like 3 days a week, and then 4 days a week, and then 5 days a week. And then by the time I moved to California, I was doing it daily. And then it got the notice of one of the syndicates, and they were like, we'd like to help you spread the love, put you on this bigger platform, online syndication. You could actually make some money off of it. So, and then I started collecting it into books, though, because I realized that in the comic book world, there was a lot more space for diversity than there was in the comic strip world. Those are like two totally different genres, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
And so then eventually, I don't know if this is too much background, but eventually Jane's World sort of transitioned away from a traditional comic strip sort of, gag a day sort of format to more long form stories. They were just as silly, but they were longer because I was I could fill up a comic book instead of just worrying about posting every day. But that's how Jane happened. And then, you look up and it's like, dude, I've been doing it for 20 years. I can't believe it. And then I decided at some point I wanted to do other things like the Missouri Vaun stuff. And I had all these other stories I wanted to tell. And when you're doing a story every single day, it's in your head all the time. Those characters are living inside your head. And I had to let them go to do other things. It was a super hard decision.
What was that like?
Well, I was like, I would really like to do a best of collection. This is what I said to myself, a best of collection for Jane, and kind of go out, be able to curate the things that I thought were the best from the 20-year run and do a book. And I worked with an editor, Andrea Colvin at Lineforge, helped me do that, which was great. And then I said, what's the one thing, how do you end a 20-year strip? And I said, okay, what's the thing that you couldn't do 20 years ago that you can do now? And it was Jane and Dorothy got married at the end of the strip.
Yeah.
And it actually got written up in the New York Times. So here's a strip that when it started couldn't get a foothold in mainstream papers, who got the biggest send-off ever because the last strip, got published in the New York Times. I was like, okay, that just ties everything up in a big red bow, right?
Yeah.
With little hearts everywhere.
And what kind of feedback were you getting about Jane's World? Because you were doing something so different.
Well, I got I got so much positive feedback because people were sort of the same with LesFic. People were hungry to see themselves represented in comics, right? And there wasn't a lot there. I mean, Alison Bechtel was doing amazing stuff, and there were other people doing, great work. But mine was sort of silly, and mine also had a fair, an equal number of straight cast members. So it was more like, this is what it's like to be a gay person living in a straight world, right? Mm-hmm. Your whole world isn't gay, Yeah. You have day jobs, you have coworkers. And so I had a ton of readers who weren't gay, guys especially, who would write and say, wow, this is so amazing to sort of get a glimpse into what this is like, or get a glimpse into this world. And I had no idea. And it's sort of a safe space for people who were curious, but, maybe felt like they couldn't read gay comics. I don't know.
Yeah. Do you find you still think about them and what they might be doing?
Oh, yeah. We had a super hilarious, inappropriate visit from an electrician last week. And I thought, oh my God, if I was still doing Jane's World, this would so be in there. I might actually have to just draw it. It would be like a 4-part, 4 or 5 comic strips to capture what went on with this dude who was mansplaining about being, about electricity, about, outlets and shit. It was really funny. Yeah, I do think about him all the time.
Oh, I kind of do hope they make special appearances back. So I was going to ask you how Missouri Vaun came about, but I feel like you kind of answered that part already when you said that you were looking to put other stories out. But you actually write across genres too. So Why is that, and how, and what's that like for you?
Well, it was funny because my personal, I like science fiction. The first few books I did were science fiction, and my publisher, Bold Strokes, they're like, nobody reads sci-fi. Those are smaller audiences. So they were encouraging me. They're like, write what you want to write what you enjoy. I mean, those are the best stories, right? Anyway. But they said, at some point you might want to try some contemporary romance because then people will read that and they'll go back and check out your science fiction stories. And I was like, oh, that's actually good advice. Because, I mean, my science fiction stories are I would say they're science fiction light. If you're looking for extreme world building and stuff and like, foreign planets and different species, you're not going to get any of that. It's more
dystopian future.
Yeah, my stories are more about like where we're all going to end up, and we're still us, right?
Yeah, I haven't read. I'm trying to think. I read All Things Rise. I read The Time Before Now. I read like 2 or 3 books kind of in that series, and I haven't read any of them, in probably 5 years or more. And I still think about your interpretation of how fucked we're going to be after peak oil. Like, oh, I hope we don't go back to homesteading. So they're great. I totally recommend them to people who are listening who haven't read any of them yet. Please go read them. But yeah, I think about that, and I think about Anna Burke's interpretation of what's going to happen to us in Compass Rose, and just like, oh, no matter what, it's not good.
We're just going to have to adapt. I
Yes.
feel like there's a path that maybe we just can't see because we're too close to it. Like the book I'm working on right now is called The Sea Within. And it also, I mean, peak oil is sort of a backstory element. It's really about the state of the oceans, and what happens to our planet when the biggest engine we have for our survival is the ocean, and the ocean begins to die. Mm-hmm. And so it takes some like real world science. It's really fun to do research for these stories, but then my characters have actually found a solution. So it's a hopeful story. I don't want to give it away, but
all right, I'll keep an eye out for it when it finally comes out.
It's supposed to be out in October.
Well, that's good. Okay. There was an article that I read recently from The Atlantic about how mining companies want to mine the ocean floor.
Oh, God.
Right?
No, they just need to say no. But I know they won't because we're so fucking greedy and selfish and short-sighted. It's really sad. It's like, I was telling somebody the other day, I feel like, I mean, I don't know everything about Canada, but I feel like the U.S. is like an adolescent who hasn't figured out how to be a grown-up yet. And, right? I mean, they stay up late, they eat junk food, they don't take responsibility for themselves. I mean, it's just like, I just feel like we're so embarrassing right now.
Mm-hmm. Canada, it's a province by province thing, and unfortunately, my province is exactly what you just described.
Oh, yeah. So we all have them.
Yes.
Thank you for being an awesome listener and supporting Tilt, the channel that brings you all the podcasts you want to hear. You're listening to Tilt. Find more podcasts on thelesbiantalkshow.com.
So you've been like reading and a part of LesFic for about 7 years now, you were saying. How do you think we're doing now compared to where we were at when you first step in? Is there anything that has you particularly excited? Is there anything? I just trailed off there, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't get to read as much as it was so funny when I first discovered it. I was voracious, man. I was just like reading book after book after book, right? And I would take a chance on all kind of books, just like self-published books, books from publishers, both mainstream and small press. And But then you start writing, you sort of see, okay, this is the breadth of what I can write, right? This is like, there's almost no story you can't tell. And then, and you sort of figure out the kind of stories you like best. Usually mine have a hero component to them, even if it's small town hero, but just somebody who steps outside themselves and does something for the greater good. Like that inspires me. So those are the kind of stories I want to write. But when you're writing actively, it's really hard for me to read other people's stuff because I don't want to accidentally ingest that and then have it come out like, you know what I mean? Like you don't, it's like you're taking all this stuff in, you've already got your own characters living in there. And so unfortunately I have a million books queued up on my Kindle. I'm not reading right this minute, but yeah, I sort of do it in spurts. I read a lot and then I take a break and then I read and then I take a break. And so for this book that I'm writing, I was needed to read a bunch of nonfiction stuff. So just for research.
But do you feel We talked a little bit about this before we started recording, about how like LesFic seems to be starting to meet up with mainstream publishing.
Yeah, it definitely feels like it's gaining traction, right? And I think maybe that's because not just in book form, but in, movies and series on Netflix and Amazon, like those stories are more diverse too, right? It's all starting to sort of cross-pollinate, because when you get rid of some of the barriers that mainstream publishing and like linear broadcasting had, it opens things up for all this different storytelling. Pretty exciting. There's almost too much content though. That's the problem I run into, right?
Yes.
There's almost too much.
Yes. It's true. There's so much, like we're blessed with choice right now.
Yeah, like when you go to Netflix, it doesn't curate anything for you, right? You have to look for stuff. You have to know it's there. It's just all there, right? So It's a little bit hard to navigate sometimes.
So do you find you have to work a little harder to make your book stand out and have audiences with so much choice there? Or does your...
Yeah, probably. I mean, probably. And lately have been doing sort of a terrible job on social media. I have somebody I work with on social media, just because I have a day job that's pretty taxing. And so I can't like do everything. And so I work with somebody, Selena De Leon. She's out of Philadelphia. She helps with a lot of my book promotion and stuff. Like we'll start working together a month or two before a book comes out, and she helps me promote it. And she's really good at making connections with people, with, influencers, I guess you would call it, and sort of connecting with other publishers and other authors and
That's great.
readers. Yeah. She's really super smart. I've learned a ton of stuff from working with her. I highly recommend her if anybody needs any help on social media. Yeah, her wife's an editor. She comes from a book background,
Oh, cool.
Smart. Yeah, really smart.
So you've done comics and novels. You self-published, and you've worked with publishers. Are there any other types of media that you want to conquer?
Well, it's funny. So I had a kids series come out a few years ago called Stinky Cecil, that was for young readers. And I had toyed with the idea of maybe trying to see what that would be like in animation, but I feel like it might just be one thing too many. I don't think I could deal with it. They sort of lend themselves to the sort of cheap and cheerful animation you see on YouTube. Those characters do. So it would have been kind of fun to see that play out, but I haven't really pursued that. Yeah, I think we were talking before we started recording, and when I woke up this morning, I was thinking about the podcast, and I was thinking, wow, when I stop and really think about it, I have like almost tried out every avenue, right? Like you said, self-publishing, indie publishers, mid-sized publishers. And I just started working with Penguin Random House on a new kids trilogy that hopefully can start showing samples of it in February. It's been kind of on lockdown for a year, and that's been a different experience too. And the thing I was thinking about all those different experiences, it's really about the people you work with, almost more than the publisher, right? In every case, I've just worked with some really great editors, like Andrea Colvin worked with me on the Stinky Cecil, and then later on the Jane's World book. And then my Bold Strokes editor is Cindy Cressup. I feel like I've gotten almost a grad school degree in creative working with her as an editor. I've learned so much, because the storytelling for a prose novel is completely different from a comic. In a comic, everybody gets a point of view, and the entire story is sort of driven forward through dialogue and action that you're drawing. And prose, you have to pick your point of view. So you have to be very judicious, and then you have to figure out how to tell your whole story from that point of view. It's a totally different, I don't know, it's just a different art form. And then my editor on this new series, Sheila Keenan, she's great. So I mean, I really think it's, the editor and the team you work with, regardless of sort of publishing size. I don't know. I'll let you know how it goes with the big publisher. This is my first time with the bigger ones. Yeah.
Okay, so my next question, I'm asking as a mom, not as the host of Les Do Books.
Yeah.
Because I have two young kids, who one is 8 and the other one is turning 5 next month. When is this new kids series coming out?
So they are my demographic for this book. It's a young reader's book, so 5 to 8-year-olds, and it's called Peanut Butter and Crackers. It's about 2 dogs and a cat, and yeah, it's going to be out in October. And there's a trilogy. So, I mean, the great thing about this bigger publisher, I think it's an imprint of Penguin Random House with Viking. So I think it's actually technically a Viking book, but they have them queued up to come out, within 6 months of each other, which is great. So basically, Wonderful. You front load all the material. Like I'm doing all the books now, and then they will come out one right after the other, which is what you want with kids, because you don't want to lose your right. You capture a kid, you wanted them to be able to get the next book within 6 months.
Yeah.
So yes, so the first one's out in October, and then spring and summer after that are the next 2.
Oh, that's great. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. I know some kids that are going to be reading these. So, the last thing I want to ask is, you mentioned you have a bunch of books ready for you on your Kindle. What are you excited to read next?
Well, I know. I was thinking to myself, I always get this, like, I describe it as book blindness, because somebody asked me, what are you reading? I was like, and I can't remember anything. So
nothing. I'm reading nothing.
Yeah. What's funny is, since I came to the party late, I keep going back and reading books that are recommended too. So like I only recently read Backwards to Oregon, which was written by Jay.
That's a good one.
That's a really good one, right? And luckily I didn't want to read it while I was writing Crossing the Wide Forever, because there's a similar kind of premise. Not at all. We not at all wrote the same story, but it's, there's a kinship there. So I didn't want to read it. That was a great book. And then, I read Casting Lacey by Elle Spencer, and she's now she's with Bold Strokes, which is fun. And let's see, what else did I write down on my list of? Oh, I have a couple of books by Erin Zach queued up, Beautiful Accidents and Falling Into Her. Have you read those?
So I haven't read Beautiful Accidents. I did read Falling Into Her. Actually, I listened to that one. If you can do audiobooks, the audio for that one is fabulous. And all
right, I'm going to make a note of that, because then I might actually get to read it sooner if I can listen to it, right?
Oh yeah,
I can listen to it.
Yeah, the big crisis scene, the acting in the big crisis scene is fantastic.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I'm good friends with VK Powell and Allie Valley, and I have 2 of their new books queued up to read, which I haven't gotten to read yet, which is so sad. VK's book Incognito, and Allie's new book is called The Inheritance, which people have been saying is really good, but I haven't gotten to read that one yet either.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah. You might like this book, which is not LesFic, but related because it's about women. Have you read Ornament and Silence?
No.
Essays on Women's Lives from Edith Wharton to Germaine Greer. It's by Kennedy Fraser. That's a book I'm currently reading.
Oh.
Because you can just pick it up and read a little at a time. Ornament and Silence. Yeah, it's about women through history. Very good. Very good.
Thank you for that tip. I just typed it into my browser so I can come back to it later. I'm going to see if my library has it. I got a Kobo for Christmas so I can start taking books out of the library.
Oh, good.
Very exciting.
That's really good. Yeah, so that's my short list on my Kindle. I guess it's not as long as I thought it was, but I know that I'm missing some good books because I tend to read reviews on your guys on the Lesbian Review site, and then I like make myself a note. Oh, I gotta go read that.
It's it's a risk of following our site.
Yeah, like the book 2 Degrees. I really wanted to read that one. I haven't read that one yet, but it's similar probably to what I'm writing now, so I didn't want to read it while I was writing this story because it's about the warming planet and stuff. I think I did read a sample of that, and I think she's coming at it from a different angle than it's not about the ocean, but because I live on the Pacific coast, I think about the sea a lot.
Did you read Thorn by Anna Burke?
No. I'll write that down too.
It's a retelling of Beauty and the Beast.
But
it's quite dark in a really kind of harsh setting. And just...
Oh, okay.
Oh, it's so beautifully done. That was my favorite book last year. hands down.
Oh, it sounds like I would like it. To be quite honest, I've realized as I've read more and more books that I guess what would be considered the traditional contemporary romance, like, is not necessarily my go-to. Like, I like something that's a little bit different, like what you're talking about, like a retelling of Beauty and the Beast would be interesting, or like an extreme context for a romance, like, I don't know, foreign locales, things like that.
Okay, I have one more recommendation for you. I cannot remember the author's names. It's 2 authors, but it's called This Is How You Lose the Time War. Because you are a sci-fi fan, it's a lesbian spy versus spy epistolary novel that takes place in the future. There are 2 factions that are kind of jumping across time to try to get to the kind of ends that they want to have. And one spy from each side, they start corresponding and leaving letters for each other.
Oh, that sounds cool.
It's really, really cleverly written because we also see the context in which they receive each letter. And we get to see what they tell each other versus what they don't. And
that sounds like a really smart book.
Yes.
So the book I'm working on now, The Sea Within, there is actually a time travel element to it because it didn't start out to be that way. But if you think about sort of so part of the problem with climate change, right, is that it's too big. You sort of can't get your head around it, right? But if you look at it in the context of geological time, it starts to make sense. It's like almost the only way to understand it. And so one of the characters in this book is a paleobotanist, and she discovers that the solutions for the future are in the past.
Oh.
And so, yeah, that's the premise of the book. The Sea Within. Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a time travel element to it. So I will love that. This is how you lose the time war, but I have to read it after I do mine.
Yes. Paige, where can people find you online if they want to connect with you?
If they just type in Paige Braddock, they'll get all my comic stuff. And I'm in the process of sort of separating the kidlit from the Jane's World stuff because the kidlit stuff's for really young readers. And I want to keep those universes separate. So you could type in stinkycecil.com and get the kidlit site. Or you can just type in Paige Braddock and that'll give you links over. Or for the Missouri Vaun stuff, just MissouriVaun.com. And Vaun is spelled V-A-U-N, which is a little bit different. And can I just say that so if people don't know this and it sounds like a made up name, I like to share that was actually my great grandmother's name. So
that's lovely.
Missouri Vaun is writing lesbian fiction from the grave and doesn't know it. Oddly, I have her typewriter, which is from the early 1900s or whatever, in my house. So it's just kind of all fitting. It's weird. I have her glasses, her little eyeglasses, and she wrote her name in the top of the glass case, and I have her typewriter, and now I'm using her name as a pen name. It's kind of a cool thing.
I love it. That is all for this episode. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
I'm Tara, and you've been listening to Les Do Books. You can email me at tara@thelesbianreview.com with your questions or comments. If you're an author who's interested in joining me on this show to talk about the LesFic you love or the trends that have you interested, please let me know. If you've enjoyed this episode, please check out the show notes where you'll find a Patreon link for Tilt or visit patreon.com/thelesbiantalkshow. Our patrons get exclusive content like bonus podcasts that no one else gets access to. To find this and many other great shows, all you need to do is search for Tilt, spelled TLT, on iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, or Spotify.